Number 1. The Las Vegas Strip Shooting. Imagine standing in a sea of 22,000 people, the desert breeze cooling the warm October air as your favorite country music plays under the bright neon glow of the city. It is a night of pure joy, a celebration of life and melody right in the heart of the entertainment capital of the world. But towering above this ocean of happiness, 32 floors up behind the gleaming golden glass of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, a man is watching. He is not there for the music. He has spent days quietly moving heavy, black bags into his suite, completely unnoticed by the thousands of guests sharing the same hallways. The stark contrast between the innocent joy on the ground below and the cold, calculated silence in that hotel room is something that still chills the blood of anyone who survived. Before we dive deeper into the darkest night in modern American history, please take a second to subscribe to the channel so you never miss these deep dives into the shadows of the human psyche. What drives a seemingly ordinary person, living a comfortable life, to meticulously plan such an unthinkable act of mass devastation? What would you have done if the sky suddenly began tearing apart in the middle of a crowded, walled-in field? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below. If this chilling reality already has you gripped, drop a like on this video right now. The music was about to stop, and a relentless reign of unimaginable terror was about to begin. At 10:05 in the evening, the rhythm of the concert is shattered by a rapid, staccato popping sound. At first, the crowd hesitates. Some think it is just fireworks, a poorly timed pyrotechnic display to accompany the final act of the festival. Others believe it might be speakers malfunctioning, a harsh electronic glitch ripping through the amplifiers. But then, people begin to fall. The popping sound does not stop. It accelerates into a deafening, continuous roar that echoes violently off the surrounding concrete and glass casinos. Panic erupts like wildfire as the terrifying realization sets in. This is no glitch. It is fully automatic gunfire raining down from the pitch-black sky, and there is almost nowhere to hide. The festival grounds, enclosed by heavy fencing, instantly transform from a sanctuary of music into a chaotic trap. Strangers throw their bodies over each other, desperately trying to shield loved ones from the invisible storm of bullets tearing through the asphalt. Every time there is a brief, agonizing pause in the gunfire, thousands surge toward the exits, only to be met with another devastating volley. The sheer scale of the ambush is impossible to comprehend in the moment. When faced with a threat you cannot see, a danger falling from the heavens themselves, how do you decide which direction is safe? Tell me what survival instinct you think would take over in the comments. Please leave a like if the bravery of those trapped strangers moves you. The nightmare in the sky was far from over. First responders and heavily armed tactical teams scrambled to locate the source of the relentless barrage. The echo of the gunshots bouncing off the massive resort towers makes it incredibly difficult to pinpoint where the shooter is hiding. Meanwhile, inside the Mandalay Bay, smoke alarms are triggered by the sheer volume of gunpowder filling the air on the 32nd floor. A security guard approaches room 32135, only to be met with a hail of bullets fired right through the heavy wooden door. Law enforcement finally converges on the suite, their weapons drawn, expecting a fierce and protracted standoff with a highly trained operative or an organized terror cell. They breach the room, tearing down the barricaded door, but the guns have already fallen completely silent. Inside, they find an arsenal. Over 20 high-powered rifles are scattered across the floor, positioned strategically near two broken windows. And there, lying lifeless among the brass casings, is 64-year-old Stephen Paddock. He had taken his own life just moments before the police broke through. He was a wealthy retired accountant, a high-stakes gambler, and a man with absolutely no criminal record. There was no manifesto, no political declaration, and no goodbye note left behind. Do you believe that pure evil can simply exist in a person without any warning signs or triggers? Share your theories in the comments section. Hit that like button if the mystery of his motive leaves you entirely unnerved. The aftermath would reveal a truth that no one was prepared to accept. When the sun finally rose over the Nevada desert the next morning, the full, devastating scale of the tragedy was laid bare. 60 innocent people had lost their lives, and over 800 others were injured in the stampede and the gunfire. The Las Vegas Strip, normally a vibrant artery of light and sound, was entirely locked down, draped in an eerie, heartbroken silence. Investigators from multiple federal agencies spent months meticulously tearing apart Stephen Paddock's life. They traced his finances, analyzed his computers, interviewed his family, and reviewed hundreds of hours of casino surveillance footage. They were desperate to find the missing piece of the puzzle, the hidden catalyst that turned a quiet, wealthy man into the deadliest mass shooter in modern American history. But they found absolutely nothing. There was no radicalization, no known vendetta, and no severe financial ruin. The terrifying reality is that Paddock simply decided to execute a massacre and took his reasons to the grave, leaving behind a permanent scar on thousands of lives and a question that will haunt the city forever. It is a chilling reminder that sometimes, the most profound monsters hide in plain sight, looking exactly like everyone else until the moment they choose to strike. Next, we leave the bright neon lights of the Strip for a quiet, snowy neighborhood up north, where a celebrated Olympic athlete's beautiful dream was violently ripped apart inside her own bedroom, leaving behind a scene so utterly horrific it defied all human belief. Number 2, Sonja McCaskie. Far from the bright neon lights of the Strip, in a quiet, snowy neighborhood up north, a celebrated Olympic athlete's beautiful dream was about to be violently ripped apart inside her own bedroom. It was the spring of 1963 in Reno, Nevada, a picturesque city nestled against the freezing, majestic Sierra Nevada mountains. 24-year-old Sonja McCaskie had everything to live for. She was a deeply talented British alpine skier who had proudly represented her country in the 1960 Winter Olympics. Strikingly beautiful and full of vibrant energy, Sonja had recently moved to Reno to work as a ski instructor, balancing her athletic passions with her deep love for her young child. She lived in a modest, quiet apartment on a peaceful street, a place that was supposed to be her safe haven after long days on the icy slopes. But as a harsh winter storm brewed outside her windows one fateful night, a completely different, unimaginable kind of storm was quietly gathering right at her front door. Someone in the shadows had been watching her, studying her routine, and waiting for the perfect, terrifying moment to strike when she was entirely alone. How do you protect yourself when the most dangerous threat is someone entirely invisible to you? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If the tragic vulnerability of this young mother sends a shiver down your spine, drop a like on this video. The silence of that snowy night was about to be broken by pure, unthinkable evil. When Sonja failed to arrive at a scheduled destination, a deep, creeping sense of dread settled over her close friends. She was fiercely reliable, and a sudden disappearance was completely out of character for the devoted mother and disciplined athlete. Her babysitter, deeply concerned by the chilling silence, went to her apartment to check on her. The front door was unlocked, and as she pushed it open, she was met with an eerie stillness that felt immediately wrong. What she discovered inside that small, seemingly ordinary apartment would forever stain the history of Reno with a profound darkness. The bedroom was completely torn apart, bearing the unmistakable, violent signs of a desperate, terrifying struggle for survival. But Sonja was nowhere to be seen. It was only when police officers arrived and began searching the property that they noticed a heavy, wooden cedar chest sitting quietly in the corner of the room. When they lifted the lid, even hardened detectives had to step away, physically sickened by the sight. The young, vibrant Olympian had not just been murdered, her body had been brutally and meticulously dismembered. What psychological breaking point makes a human being capable of inflicting such calculated, gruesome horror upon another? Tell me what you think drives such cold-blooded brutality in the comments section. If the chilling discovery inside that wooden chest makes your blood run cold, please leave a like. The hunt for this ruthless monster would reveal a suspect that no one could have ever anticipated. The sheer brutality of the crime sent immediate shockwaves through the tight-knit ski community and the entire state of Nevada. Citizens locked their doors, terrified that a seasoned, sadistic serial killer was roaming their quiet, snowy streets. Detectives worked around the clock, processing the gruesome scene for any microscopic clue left behind in the chaos. The breakthrough came from a single, bloody fingerprint discovered on the wall of the apartment, a careless mistake made by a killer intoxicated by his own violence. But when the fingerprint was matched, the identity of the perpetrator shattered all preconceived notions of what a monster is supposed to look like. It was not a drifter or a hardened career criminal. The killer was an 18-year-old high school student named Thomas Lee Bean. He was a quiet, unassuming teenager who blended perfectly into the background of everyday life, yet harbored exceptionally dark, violent fantasies. He had broken into her home in the dead of night, attacked her with overwhelming force, and spent hours carrying out his terrifying, methodical plan. How does a seemingly normal teenager sitting in a high school classroom transform into a merciless predator overnight? Share your psychological theories with me down in the comments below. If the terrifying reality that a monster can be the quiet kid next door unnerves you, hit that like button. Thomas Lee Bean was in custody, but the horrifying details of his confession would plunge the city even deeper into despair. During the intensely watched trial, the full scope of Thomas Lee Bean's depravity was laid bare before a stunned and completely heartbroken courtroom. He coldly admitted to breaking into Sonja's apartment with the absolute intention of committing violence, overpowering the strong, athletic woman before strangling her to death in the dark. The subsequent dismemberment, he claimed, was merely a frantic, grotesque attempt to hide her physical remains inside the wooden cedar chest and cover up his unspeakable, horrifying crime. The jury did not hesitate for a moment. Bean was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to die in Nevada's infamous gas chamber, though his sentence was later controversially commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The deeply tragic death of Sonja McCaskie remains one of the most deeply disturbing chapters in Nevada's history, a stark, terrifying reminder of how quickly and violently a beautiful, promising life can be permanently extinguished. She came to the majestic mountains seeking peace, fresh snow, and a brilliant future for her young child, only to meet a devastatingly cruel end at the hands of a passing shadow. We now leave the freezing mountains behind and travel south to the bustling, crowded floor of a brightly lit casino, where a vibrant 7-year-old girl simply walked into a public restroom, completely unaware that the teenager silently following right behind her was a ruthless predator hiding in plain sight. Number 3. Jeremy Strohmeyer and Sherrice Iverson. The bright, ringing chaos of a casino floor is meant to be a playground of constant distraction, a place where people are too mesmerized by the flashing lights to notice the dark intentions of strangers. But on a bustling night at the Prim Valley Resort, an 18-year-old named Jeremy Strohmeyer was paying very close attention, silently following a vibrant 7-year-old girl named Sherrice Iverson right into a public restroom. It was the early morning hours of a busy weekend, and the massive casino situated right on the border was packed with eager tourists. Sherrice, full of youthful energy and absolute innocence, was playing games in the arcade section, while her father gambled nearby. She was completely oblivious to the cold, predatory gaze locked onto her from across the noisy room. Strohmeyer, a teenager who had been aimlessly wandering the entertainment complex with a friend, spotted the little girl and felt a deeply sinister impulse completely take over his mind. As Sherrice skipped toward the women's restroom, Strohmeyer slipped through the heavy door right behind her, effectively trapping the helpless child in an isolated space just feet away from thousands of oblivious people. Why do you think predators feel so emboldened in heavily populated, highly secure environments like crowded casinos? Please let me know your psychological theories down in the comments below. If the terrifying vulnerability of a child in a public space makes your heart ache, drop a like on this video. The absolute horror that unfolded behind that closed door would defy all human comprehension. Inside the cold, tiled walls of the restroom, the 18-year-old unleashed an unspeakable nightmare upon the completely defenseless 7-year-old. He forced her into one of the narrow stalls, brutally assaulting her as the loud chimes of slot machines echoed faintly from the casino floor outside. Sherrice fought for her life, her small voice tragically drowned out by the mechanical symphony of gambling and mindless entertainment just on the other side of the wall. But the most disturbing and deeply infuriating detail of this entire tragedy is what happened next. Strohmeyer's friend, a young man named David Cash, walked into the restroom looking for him. He leaned over the top of the stall, looked down, and watched his friend actively attacking the terrified little girl. He had the power to stop it. He had the chance to be a hero, to pull Strohmeyer off the child and save her life. Instead, Cash simply turned around, walked out of the bathroom, and completely ignored the horrific crime. Without anyone to intervene, Strohmeyer violently strangled young Sherrice, leaving her lifeless body slumped in the stall before casually walking out to rejoin his deeply apathetic friend. How is it possible for a human being to witness such sheer brutality against a child and simply walk away without feeling any moral obligation to act? Tell me what you think about this profound lack of empathy in the comments section. If this sickening display of cowardice leaves you absolutely enraged, please leave a like. The devastating discovery of the young victim would immediately trigger a desperate, nationwide manhunt. When casino staff finally discovered Sherrice's fragile body later that morning, the vibrant resort immediately transformed into a frantic, heavily guarded crime scene. Detectives rushed to the security monitoring room, desperately combing through thousands of hours of high-definition surveillance footage to retrace the little girl's final, heartbreaking steps. It did not take long for them to identify the two teenagers casually stalking her through the arcade and lingering near the restroom doors. By the time authorities fully identified the suspects, Strohmeyer and Cash had already fled back across the state line into California. A highly coordinated task force tracked Strohmeyer down, arresting him before he could vanish entirely. However, as the horrifying details of the murder were released to the public, a secondary wave of sheer, unadulterated outrage swept across the nation. The anger was directed not just at the brutal killer, but at David Cash, the friend who watched the assault and did absolutely nothing. Astonishingly, under the existing legal framework at the time, Cash had committed no technical crime by failing to intervene or report the murder. He walked away completely free, facing absolutely no criminal charges for his chilling indifference. Do you believe that bystanders who willingly ignore a violent crime should be held legally responsible for the outcome? Share your perspective on this complex moral and legal issue in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe true justice demands accountability for everyone involved. The deafening public uproar over this glaring legal loophole would permanently alter the laws of the state. Facing a mountain of irrefutable forensic evidence and his own damning confessions, Jeremy Strohmeyer realized he could not escape the severe consequences of his ruthless actions. To avoid the terrifying prospect of the death penalty, he pleaded guilty to murder and kidnapping, receiving multiple consecutive life sentences behind the concrete walls of a maximum security prison. While the killer was permanently locked away, the devastating legacy of Sherrice Iverson's murder ignited a fierce, unstoppable political movement across the country. Outraged citizens, lawmakers, and child advocacy groups rallied tirelessly to close the horrifying legal gap that allowed David Cash to walk free without a single charge. Their relentless campaigning ultimately resulted in the passage of the Sherrice-Iverson Act in Nevada, a highly significant law that strictly requires citizens to notify law enforcement if they witness an act of violence against a minor. This deeply tragic loss forced society to reevaluate the profound moral duty we owe to one another, proving that silent complicity can be just as deeply destructive as the violent act itself. Sherrice's vibrant light was stolen far too soon, but her name will forever stand as a powerful legal shield, protecting vulnerable children from the dark apathy of bystanders. Next, we journey far back in time to the unforgiving, sun-scorched desert of the early 20th century, chasing the ghostly trail of a legendary outlaw who slaughtered dozens of people, outsmarted every armed posse, and simply vanished into the barren wilderness until his dry, bleached skeleton was finally discovered hidden inside a remote mountain cave decades later. Number 4. The Legend of Queho. Out in the unforgiving, sun-scorched desert of the early 20th century, the ghostly trail of an outlaw who vanished into the barren wilderness begins with the terrifying whisper of a single name. Long before neon lights illuminated the Nevada skyline, the rugged, desolate canyons of the Southern Territory belonged to a phantom known only as Queho. Born in the late 1800s, this marginalized Native American man was deeply isolated from both his own tribe and the encroaching modern settlements, eventually transforming into what historians consider to be the state's first serial killer. The Mojave Desert can easily claim a life in hours, but for Queho, the blistering heat was an impenetrable fortress. Armed with stolen weapons and an intimate knowledge of the treacherous landscape, he began a relentless, bloody rampage targeting miners, isolated ranchers, and wandering travelers who strayed too far from the safety of expanding towns. The authorities were dealing with an elusive ghost, a man who struck with lethal precision and then seemingly dissolved right back into the shifting sands. How does a single man completely outsmart the combined forces of law enforcement, while surviving alone in one of the most hostile environments on Earth? Let me know your survival theories down in the comments below. If the chilling tale of an untamable desert phantom has you hooked, drop a like on this video. The hunt for this ruthless killer was about to become the most massive pursuit the desert had ever seen. As the brutal body count slowly climbed to over 20 victims, a profound, suffocating panic gripped the isolated mining camps and growing railway towns. The mere mention of Queho's name was enough to make heavily armed men lock their doors and refuse to travel after dark. Furious and desperate to restore order, the state of Nevada placed a massive, historic bounty on his head, drawing hundreds of eager bounty hunters, seasoned sheriffs, and indigenous trackers into the baking desert heat. Posses mounted on horseback combed through every canyon, cave, and dried riverbed, completely determined to bring the phantom to justice, dead or alive. Yet, every single pursuit ended in bitter failure and humiliating defeat. Queho was a master of deception, often walking backward in his own tracks to confuse the trailing hounds, or patiently hiding on high ridges, quietly watching the exhausted lawmen wander aimlessly directly below him. He would strike a remote cabin, take whatever supplies he needed, leave a trail of devastating carnage, and vanish hours before anyone even realized the crime had occurred. The hunters were constantly becoming the hunted, completely outmatched by a predator who felt no fear and required almost nothing to survive. What is it about the vast, empty wilderness that makes the idea of a hidden killer so deeply paralyzing to the human mind? Tell me your thoughts on this psychological terror in the comments section. If you are gripped by this deadly game of cat and mouse, please leave a like. The legendary outlaw was about to pull off his greatest vanishing act of all. Years slowly turned into decades, and the bloody trail of the desert phantom simply went completely cold. Despite the massive reward money and the countless armed patrols relentlessly searching the jagged mountain ranges, Queho was never captured. He became a terrifying bedtime story, a dark myth used to frighten children into staying close to home. Whenever a solitary miner disappeared or a stray bullet echoed through a distant canyon, terrified locals immediately blamed the immortal outlaw, firmly believing he was still watching them from the high peaks. Many historians and frustrated lawmen began to heavily debate his ultimate fate. Some argued he had quietly slipped across the border into Mexico to live out his days in absolute peace, while others believed he had finally succumbed to the harsh, unforgiving elements of the barren wasteland he called home. The towering legend of the untouchable killer grew larger with every passing year, embedding itself deeply into the dusty folklore of the American West. But the searing desert is incredibly patient, and it rarely keeps its dark secrets buried forever. Long after the bounty hunters had died and the mining towns had turned to quiet dust, the rugged mountains were preparing to finally reveal the grim, absolute truth. Do you think a person can truly disappear forever, or does the earth always find a way to expose what has been deeply hidden? Share your perspective in the comments below. Hit that like button if the enduring mystery of his disappearance fascinates you. Decades later, a shocking discovery inside a remote cavern would finally close the book on this bloody chapter. In the scorching winter of 1940, long after the Wild West had been paved over by modern highways and buzzing electricity, a pair of exhausted prospectors were hiking through a deeply isolated area near the Colorado River. Seeking shelter from the relentless sun, they stumbled upon a hidden, high-altitude cave perfectly concealed from the valley below. As their eyes adjusted to the thick, ancient darkness, they made a discovery that would instantly solve Nevada's oldest mystery. Lying perfectly undisturbed among a collection of stolen rifles, old ammunition, and rusted tin cans was a complete, sun-bleached human skeleton. Dental records and the highly specific artifacts surrounding the bones confirmed the impossible truth. It was Queho. The most feared and heavily hunted man in the history of the state had not been killed by a heroic lawman's bullet, nor had he escaped to a distant country. He had simply grown old, retreated to his final, impenetrable fortress in the sky, and quietly passed away entirely alone in the deep silence of the mountains. His remains were eventually put on public display for years, a macabre and undignified end for a man who had completely terrified a growing state. His dark legacy remains a haunting testament to the brutal, untamed violence of the desert. Now we leave the dusty, ancient canyons and head straight into the glowing neon traffic of the modern strip, where a beloved global music icon was violently gunned down in a luxury car, sparking a decades-long mystery that only recently saw a stunning breakthrough. Number 5. Tupac Shakur. We trade the ancient canyons for the glowing neon traffic of the modern strip, where a beloved global music icon was about to be violently gunned down. It was the night of September 7, 1996, and Las Vegas was absolutely vibrating with an electric, chaotic energy. A highly anticipated heavyweight boxing match had just concluded at the MGM Grand, drawing massive crowds of celebrities and eager tourists to the desert oasis. Among the glittering elite was 25-year-old Tupac Shakur, a profoundly influential rapper at the absolute peak of his global fame. After the fight, Tupac climbed into the passenger seat of a sleek, black BMW. They merged into the heavy, slow-moving traffic of the strip, surrounded by hundreds of fans and flashing casino lights. In that exact moment, he seemed entirely untouchable, a superstar riding on top of the world. But as the luxury car came to a complete stop at a crowded red light on Flamingo Road, the illusion of absolute safety was permanently shattered. A white Cadillac quietly pulled up right alongside the passenger side, rolling down its windows in the warm desert night. How does someone so universally recognized become completely vulnerable in the middle of the most crowded street in the city? Tell me your thoughts on the illusion of celebrity safety in the comments below. If the shocking suddenness of this tragedy deeply unnerves you, drop a like on this video. The booming bass from the car stereo was about to be violently replaced by the deafening roar of gunfire. Without a single word of warning, a heavy barrage of bullets tore through the cool night air, shattering the passenger side window of the dark BMW. 14 separate shots were rapidly fired from the white Cadillac directly into the luxury vehicle. Despite the driver's frantic attempts to pull Tupac down away from the incoming storm of glass and metal, the legendary musician was struck 4 times in his chest, arm, and thigh. The busy intersection instantly erupted into absolute, terrifying chaos. Panicked tourists dived onto the hard concrete sidewalks, desperately screaming and covering their heads as the deafening echoes bounced off the towering, glittering hotel facades. As quickly as the mysterious shooters had appeared, the white Cadillac aggressively accelerated, screeching its tires as it vanished completely into the blinding sea of Las Vegas traffic. Inside the severely damaged BMW, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Despite having shrapnel wounds and flattened tires, the driver frantically hit the gas pedal, weaving recklessly through the crowded streets in a desperate, bleeding race to the nearest hospital. The sheer brazenness of executing a highly coordinated assassination on one of the busiest, most heavily surveilled streets in the entire world remains absolutely staggering. Why do you think heavily armed attackers feel so emboldened to strike in areas completely packed with hundreds of potential witnesses? Please share your psychological theories down in the comments section. If the terrifying chaos of that fateful night leaves you entirely breathless, please leave a like. The desperate fight for the young icon's life was about to begin inside the emergency room. For 6 agonizing days, the entire world held its collective breath as Tupac Shakur fought a desperate, losing battle for his life inside the intensive care unit. Despite multiple invasive surgeries and the removal of his right lung, the catastrophic internal injuries were simply too severe. On September 13th, the vibrant, deeply poetic voice of a generation was permanently silenced. The immediate police investigation that followed was severely crippled from the very beginning. Despite the shooting taking place in front of a massive convoy of cars and dozens of bystanders, law enforcement ran into a massive, impenetrable wall of silence. Witnesses completely refused to cooperate, either paralyzed by a deep fear of violent retaliation or bound by a strict street code of absolute loyalty. The blinding glare of a furious coastal music rivalry completely overshadowed the hard forensic facts, generating countless wild rumors and endless conspiracy theories that aggressively pointed fingers in every possible direction. Decades slowly passed without a single arrest, turning the murder of a global superstar into one of the most famously unsolved mysteries in modern American history. The white Cadillac simply became a dark ghost story. Do you believe that a widespread culture of silence is more powerful than the pursuit of absolute justice? Tell me your honest perspective in the comments below. Hit that like button if the decades of frustrating silence make your blood boil. After 27 years of agonizing dead ends, an unexpected whisper would finally blow the cold case entirely wide open. For almost 3 decades, it genuinely seemed like the killers had committed the perfect, untraceable crime in the middle of a massive crowd. But human ego is a highly dangerous and incredibly fragile thing. Over the years, a former gang leader named Dwayne Davis began making highly reckless public statements, participating in extensive documentary interviews and even publishing a detailed memoir where he brazenly boasted about his direct presence inside the infamous white Cadillac. He claimed he was the one who handed the murder weapon to the shooter in the back seat, driven by a desire for street revenge after a previous physical altercation at the boxing match. His arrogant need for public notoriety ultimately provided the exact ammunition the cold case detectives desperately needed. In late 2023, an astonishing 27 years after the brutal shooting, heavily armed police raided his suburban home and officially indicted him on charges of murder with a deadly weapon. The deeply tragic, unresolved shadow that had haunted the music industry for a generation finally saw a profound flicker of true legal justice. A simple red light had stolen a legend, but the truth refused to remain buried in the desert sands forever. We now leave the glitz and flashing cameras of the celebrity world for a deeply disturbing, purely domestic nightmare, where a foul, suffocating odor slowly leaking from an abandoned storage unit would eventually reveal a daughter's incredibly grotesque betrayal of her own elderly mother. Number 6. Brookey Lee West. We leave the glitz and flashing cameras of the celebrity world for a deeply disturbing, purely domestic nightmare, where a foul, suffocating odor slowly leaking from an abandoned storage unit would eventually reveal a daughter's incredibly grotesque betrayal of her own elderly mother. In the late 1990s, 65-year-old Lucille Lore vanished from her daily routine in Las Vegas without a single trace. She was a vulnerable woman who heavily relied on the care and support of her adult daughter, a seemingly ordinary woman named Brookey Lee West. When concerned neighbors and distant relatives began asking pointed questions about the sudden, deafening silence, Brookey calmly assured them that her aging mother had simply decided to move away to start a fresh, independent chapter of her life. It was a perfectly believable lie, delivered with a chillingly steady voice that completely deflected any suspicion. For 3 long years, Brookey went about her normal life, blending perfectly into the suburban desert landscape, while harboring a secret so unimaginably dark it defied all fundamental laws of human nature. How does a person look their own family members directly in the eye and lie about the very existence of their own mother without breaking down under the immense psychological weight? Let me know your thoughts on this level of deception down in the comments below. If the cold, calculated calmness of this betrayal makes your skin crawl, please drop a like on this video. The terrible truth was quietly waiting inside a padlocked metal door, just a few miles away. The chilling facade finally began to crack in the sweltering desert heat of early 2001. A completely ordinary public storage facility in Las Vegas had a deeply overdue account that required immediate administrative clearing. When the facility manager approached the rusted metal door of Brookey Lee West's rented unit and cut the heavy padlock, an overwhelming, deeply foul odor immediately flooded the narrow concrete hallway. The unit was completely empty, save for one deeply terrifying object sitting alone in the absolute center of the dark room. It was a massive, heavy-duty garbage can, meticulously sealed shut with multiple thick layers of heavy industrial plastic and tightly bound with endless rolls of thick duct tape. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene and carefully cut through the heavy plastic casing, The gruesome reality of Lucille Lore's so-called peaceful retirement was finally exposed to the world. She had not traveled away to start a new life. Her daughter had brutally murdered her, folded her fragile body into the confined plastic bin, and left her to slowly decay in the suffocating darkness of a rented, windowless vault. What kind of emotional detachment is required to physically dispose of the woman who gave you life like a piece of discarded garbage? Tell me your psychological theories about this profound lack of empathy in the comments section. If the horrific discovery inside that sealed container deeply unsettles you, please leave a like. The motive behind this unspeakable brutality would prove to be even more sickening than the crime itself. As homicide detectives began meticulously tearing apart the financial records of the seemingly normal daughter, the deeply sinister motive driving this unimaginable horror was completely laid bare. This was not a sudden crime of passion, nor was it the tragic result of a heated domestic dispute spiraling out of control. It was a cold, incredibly calculated act of pure financial greed. For 36 agonizing months while her mother's remains quietly decomposed inside the sealed plastic bin, Brookey Lee West had been systematically forging signatures and illegally cashing her deceased mother's monthly Social Security checks. She had brutally traded the life of her own parent for a steady, modest stream of stolen government income, spending the bloody money on her own completely ordinary living expenses. When heavily armed police finally cornered Brookey and placed her in tight steel handcuffs, her demeanor remained incredibly stoic and profoundly unapologetic. She desperately tried to spin a fabricated narrative, coldly claiming that her mother had simply died of completely natural causes in her sleep, and that she had only hidden the body out of overwhelming panic. But the deeply thorough forensic pathology reports told a much darker story of violent, deliberate trauma before death. Do you believe that financial desperation can truly push an otherwise normal person to commit such unspeakable evil against their own blood? Share your thoughts on the corrupting power of greed in the comments below. Hit that like button if the sheer callousness of this daughter completely shocks you. The courtroom was about to witness the final, dramatic collapse of a highly practiced sociopath. Inside the highly publicized, tense atmosphere of the Las Vegas courtroom, Brookey Lee West's carefully constructed web of devastating lies completely unraveled before a deeply disgusted jury. The prosecuting attorneys systematically dismantled her fragile defense, utilizing the overwhelming mountain of forged financial documents and the deeply disturbing forensic evidence recovered from the suffocating storage unit. The jury took very little time to reach a unanimous, absolute conclusion. The cold-blooded daughter was swiftly convicted of first-degree murder and permanently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring she would take her final breaths behind heavy iron bars. The deeply tragic, profoundly disturbing case of the garbage can murder remains one of the darkest domestic stains in the history of the entire state. It serves as a terrifying, permanent reminder that the most dangerous monsters do not always hide in the dark alleys or the vast desert wastelands. Sometimes, they are the very people we invite to our dinner tables, the ones who share our blood and casually smile at us across the living room. Lucille Lore trusted her daughter with her vulnerable life, only to be thrown away into a dark, forgotten corner for a handful of stolen dollars. We now turn our eyes away from a suffocating, hidden plastic bin toward the towering, luxurious heights of a massive resort tower, where a young employee's desperate, deeply twisted desire to become a sudden hero would ignite a raging inferno that would claim the lives of 8 innocent people.
Number 7. The Las Vegas Hilton Arson. We turn our eyes away from a suffocating, hidden plastic bin toward the towering, luxurious heights of a massive resort tower, where a young employee's desperate, deeply twisted desire to become a sudden hero would ignite a raging inferno. In the winter of 1981, the Las Vegas Hilton stood as a glittering crown jewel of the Strip, a colossal playground for thousands of wealthy guests and performing celebrities. On the 8th floor, surrounded by thick carpets and heavy, elegant drapes, 23-year-old Philip Klein was working a mundane shift as a hotel busboy. It was a deeply insecure young man, entirely invisible to the thousands of glamorous tourists who walked right past him every single day. Deep inside his mind, a highly dangerous fantasy was slowly beginning to take root. It did not want to cause intentional harm, he simply wanted to be noticed, to be celebrated as a brave savior in a moment of terrifying crisis. In the quiet, dimly lit hallway of the East Tower, he pulled out a cheap lighter and held a small, flickering flame against a thick window curtain, completely underestimating the catastrophic chain reaction he was about to unleash upon the sleeping hotel. Have you ever wondered how incredibly fragile the line is between a foolish desire for attention and a devastating tragedy? Tell me your thoughts on this psychological phenomenon in the comments below. If the terrifying vulnerability of massive high-rise hotels makes you nervous, drop a like on this video. The teeny, flickering flame was about to transform into an uncontrollable wall of absolute death. Klein's plan was unbelievably reckless but simple. He intended to light a small fire, wait for it to grow just enough to trigger an alarm, and then heroically extinguish it before the fire department arrived, cementing his legacy as the ultimate savior. But he had completely failed to account for the highly flammable nature of the hotel's luxurious interior decorations. The heavy curtain ignited with terrifying speed, instantly shooting flames up to the ceiling and igniting the thick, toxic wallpaper. Within mere seconds, the fire was entirely out of his control. A roaring, superheated flashover exploded down the long, carpeted corridor, transforming the 8th floor into a completely blinding, suffocating furnace of black smoke and searing heat. Hundreds of unsuspecting guests were suddenly jolted awake by the deafening sound of shattering glass and screaming sirens. Panic instantly consumed the massive resort as the toxic black smoke rapidly traveled through the ventilation shafts, choking the air out of the floors far above. Families desperately trapped in their hotel rooms shattered their heavy glass windows, gasping for the cool desert air while massive flames aggressively licked the exterior of the towering golden building. The young busboy who only wanted to play the hero was now frantically fleeing the apocalyptic nightmare he had just created. Why do you think human beings so often believe they can perfectly control highly chaotic, natural forces like fire? Share your thoughts on this profound arrogance in the comment section. If the terrifying speed of this raging inferno grips your heart, please leave a like. The desperate, agonizing battle for sheer survival was just beginning. Hundreds of brave firefighters rushed to the towering inferno, battling through the blinding darkness and intense heat to pull screaming guests from the upper floors. Helicopters aggressively circled the blazing rooftop, desperately airlifting trapped victims as the fire violently consumed everything in its path. Despite the incredibly heroic efforts of the first responders, the human toll of the disaster was absolutely devastating. 8 innocent people lost their lives, heavily choked by the toxic smoke or burned by the intense, roaring flames, while over 200 others suffered severe injuries. The glittering casino floor below was transformed into a chaotic, flooded triage center, covered in shattered glass, soot, and deeply traumatized survivors. As the massive fire was finally extinguished and the thick smoke slowly cleared, fire marshals and federal investigators began meticulously sifting through the charred, blackened remains of the 8th floor. It did not take them long to discover the highly suspicious point of origin near the burned elevator banks. Philip Keene's initial, frantic statements to the police were filled with massive, glaring inconsistencies. He desperately tried to claim he had simply discovered the fire, but his timeline deeply contradicted the physical evidence left behind in the ashes. Do you believe that an unintentional catastrophe caused by absolute foolishness is just as evil as a highly premeditated murder? Tell me your perspective on this difficult moral question in the comments below. Hit that like button if the sheer scale of this preventable tragedy deeply breaks your heart. The young busboy was about to face the crushing, permanent weight of his deadly fantasy. Under intense, relentless police interrogation, the fragile web of lies completely collapsed. Philip Klein broke down and confessed the terrifying, absolute truth. He admitted to deliberately starting the fire with the deeply twisted intention of becoming a widely celebrated hero by instantly putting it out. The agonizing reality that his pathetic, childish cry for attention had brutally murdered 8 innocent people finally crashed down upon his shoulders. During his highly emotional trial, his defense team desperately argued that he never actually intended to hurt a single living soul, but the prosecution painted a highly disturbing picture of a profoundly reckless man whose immense vanity completely outweighed the basic sanctity of human life. The jury showed absolutely no mercy. Queho was swiftly convicted of 8 counts of felony murder and permanently sentenced to 8 consecutive life terms in prison without the slightest possibility of parole. The devastating Hilton fire forever altered massive hotel safety regulations across the entire globe, forcing the strict implementation of modern sprinkler systems and highly advanced fire retardant materials. The towering Golden Hotel was eventually repaired, but the tragic, invisible scars of that horrific night will forever haunt the long corridors of the 8th floor. Next, we leave the charred ruins of the resort and delve into the lavish, highly secretive world of immense casino wealth, where a famous tycoon is found dead in his own home, triggering a deeply twisted saga of brutal betrayal, a highly publicized murder trial, and a massive fortune in pure silver stolen straight from a hole in the unforgiving desert ground.
Number 8. Ted Binion. We leave the charred ruins of the resort and delve into the lavish, highly secretive world of immense casino wealth, where a famous tycoon was found dead in his own luxurious home, triggering a deeply twisted saga of brutal betrayal. In the fall of 1998, 55-year-old Ted Binion was Las Vegas royalty. As the wealthy heir to the legendary Horseshoe Casino, his entire life was deeply immersed in high-stakes gambling, overflowing cash, and dangerous, powerful connections. Yet, despite his immense fortune, Binion was a man profoundly haunted by severe personal demons, spiraling down into the dark, suffocating grip of deep addiction. He lived inside a sprawling, highly secure mansion, a beautiful golden cage where he hoarded not just millions of dollars, but devastating, toxic relationships. His young, deeply glamorous girlfriend, Sandy Murphy, shared his lavish lifestyle, but the gleaming surface of their romance hid a highly volatile, completely destructive reality. On a quiet September afternoon, the blinding facade of extreme wealth completely shattered when Sandy frantically called emergency dispatchers, hysterically claiming she had just found the casino tycoon lying dead on the floor of his estate. A completely empty bottle of highly potent prescription pills was sitting right beside his cold, lifeless body. How does a man who seemingly has enough wealth to buy the entire world end up entirely broken on his own bedroom floor? Let me know your psychological theories down in the comments below. If the dark, hidden reality of extreme wealth fascinates you, drop a like on this video. The initial tragic assumption of a simple drug overdose was about to be aggressively torn apart. When homicide detectives first arrived at the sprawling mansion, the tragic scene looked perfectly straightforward. To the untrained eye, it appeared that a deeply troubled, addicted man had simply lost his final, desperate battle with his own relentless demons. But seasoned investigators immediately noticed highly suspicious inconsistencies scattered around the quiet room. There was no suicide note, and the physical positioning of the body seemed subtly staged, entirely unnatural for a man who had supposedly slipped into a peaceful coma. The deepest suspicions of the authorities, and of Binion's fiercely protective family, were violently confirmed just 2 days later out in the desolate, sun-scorched desert of Pahrump. Ted Binion had an intense, paranoid obsession with hiding his immense wealth. He had previously buried millions of dollars worth of pure silver bars inside a massive, fortified underground vault in the middle of the barren wasteland. In the dead of night, heavily armed sheriff's deputies stumbled upon a frantic excavation operation right at the site of the secret vault. The man desperately digging up the silver was Rick Tabish, a contractor who also happened to be Sandy Murphy's secret, passionate lover. The stunning discovery instantly transformed a tragic, isolated overdose into a highly calculated conspiracy of absolute greed. Why do you think incredibly wealthy individuals so often attract people who are completely willing to kill for a piece of the fortune? Share your thoughts on the dark seduction of money in the comments section. If the stunning betrayal of a secret lover grips your imagination, please leave a like. The treacherous lovers had fallen into a massive trap, and a sensational murder trial was rapidly approaching. The subsequent legal battle immediately became the absolute center of global media attention, completely captivating a deeply fascinated public with a toxic, cinematic mixture of immense wealth, beautiful people, and cold-blooded murder. Prosecutors aggressively painted a terrifying, deeply vivid picture for the captivated jury. They argued that Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish had ruthlessly conspired to physically force a lethal combination of heavy prescription drugs and black tar heroin down the wealthy tycoon's throat, intentionally suffocating him to permanently secure his massive fortune for themselves. The deeply shocking testimony revealed a dark, highly manipulative web of secret phone calls, hidden affairs, and a desperate, violent rush to steal the buried silver before the authorities even realized the crime had occurred. The jury was entirely convinced by the overwhelming narrative of greed, swiftly convicting both Sandy and Rick of first-degree murder. They were immediately sentenced to spend the rest of their natural lives behind heavy iron bars. But the deeply unpredictable, constantly twisting saga of the casino tycoon's death was far from reaching its final conclusion. In a massive, stunning legal maneuver that completely shocked the entire nation, the state's Supreme Court suddenly overturned their murder convictions years later, citing severe, fundamental errors in how the initial trial was legally conducted. Do you believe that complex legal technicalities should ever hold the power to completely overturn a unanimous, hard-fought murder conviction? Tell me your absolute honest perspective down in the comments below. Hit that like button if the constantly shifting, highly dramatic legal battle completely mesmerizes you. A highly controversial second trial was about to rewrite the entire history of the infamous crime. During the highly anticipated, completely explosive second trial, the defense aggressively shifted the entire narrative, fiercely arguing that the immensely wealthy tycoon truly had orchestrated his own tragic demise through a massive, voluntary drug overdose. They relentlessly attacked the prosecution's forensic timeline, skillfully planting profound seeds of reasonable doubt within the minds of the new jury. In a deeply controversial, utterly shocking verdict that echoed through the glittering casinos, both Sandy Murphy and Rick Tabish were completely acquitted of the brutal murder of Ted Binion. While they were still convicted of lesser charges related to the massive attempted theft of the buried silver, the harsh reality was that they had successfully beaten the ultimate penalty, eventually walking completely free from the heavy shadow of a life sentence. The dark, deeply unresolved death of the casino tycoon remains a profoundly unsettling stain on the glittering legacy of the city, a permanent reminder that immense fortunes often bring a deadly curse. The millions in silver were eventually recovered, but the absolute truth of what happened in that quiet bedroom remains buried forever beneath bitter deception. We must now leave the quiet, heavily guarded mansions of the extreme elite and walk into a completely ordinary, brightly lit neighborhood grocery store, where an unassuming morning shift would be instantly shattered by a heavily armed man dressed in full military camouflage, bringing the horrifying chaos of a battlefield directly into the peaceful aisles. Number 9. Zane Floyd. We must now leave the quiet, heavily guarded mansions of the extreme elite and walk into a completely ordinary, brightly lit neighborhood grocery store, where an unassuming morning shift would be instantly shattered by a heavily armed man dressed in full military camouflage, bringing the horrifying chaos of a battlefield directly into the peaceful aisles. It was the early, quiet hours of a warm June morning in 1999. Inside an Albertsons supermarket on West Sahara Avenue in Las Vegas, a small dedicated crew of night shift employees was calmly stocking shelves, completely unaware of the approaching storm. The bright fluorescent lights hummed above rows of colorful cereal boxes and fresh produce, creating a perfectly safe, deeply mundane suburban environment. Outside in the dark parking lot, 23-year-old Zane Floyd was methodically preparing for absolute slaughter. A former Marine with a deeply troubled mind, Floyd had dressed himself in full military camouflage, strapped a heavy bandolier of extra ammunition across his chest, and loaded a devastating 12-gauge shotgun. Without any warning, he aggressively kicked open the glass front doors and stepped onto the polished tile floor, immediately transforming the peaceful sanctuary of a neighborhood market into a terrifying, inescapable combat zone. Why do you think a person violently brings a theater of war into a completely innocent, everyday space? Let me know your psychological theories down in the comments below. If the terrifying vulnerability of ordinary daily routines makes your skin crawl, drop a like on this video. The silence of the morning was about to be obliterated by a deafening roar of relentless violence. The very second his heavy combat boots hit the linoleum, Zane Floyd raised his shotgun and fired. The thunderous boom completely shattered the quiet hum of the refrigerators, echoing violently across the sprawling store. Panicked employees, who just moments before were mindlessly stacking fruit, desperately scrambled for cover behind thin metallic shelves that offered absolutely no protection from the heavy blasts. Floyd moved through the narrow aisles with a terrifying, cold-blooded tactical precision. He was not rushing. He stalked his innocent victims with the deeply disturbing calmness of a trained soldier on an active battlefield. He cornered terrified workers trying to flee toward the back storage rooms, mercilessly gunning them down at point-blank range. In a matter of agonizing minutes, 4 innocent employees were brutally murdered, their lives permanently extinguished among scattered groceries and shattered glass. Another worker was severely wounded but miraculously managed to play dead, holding his breath as the heavily armed killer walked right past his bleeding body. The sheer randomness of the violence, the absolute lack of any specific target or clear motive, made the slaughter completely incomprehensible to those desperately hiding in the dark corners of the store. What goes through a survivor's mind when forced to lie perfectly still next to a ruthless killer? Tell me your thoughts on this immense psychological terror in the comments section. If the bravery of those terrified employees holding their breath completely grips your heart, please leave a like. The nightmare inside the aisles was far from over, but a highly intense standoff was rapidly approaching. Frantic, desperate emergency calls flooded the police dispatch lines, and within moments, highly trained tactical officers swarmed the grocery store parking lot. As Floyd emerged from the shattered front doors, his shotgun still tightly gripped in his hands, he was immediately met by a massive wall of heavily armed police. A young, fiercely brave responding officer locked eyes with the ruthless killer, his weapon drawn, fully prepared to end the rampage with lethal force. But instead of engaging in a final, bloody firefight with the authorities, Floyd suddenly turned the devastating 12-gauge shotgun around, pressing the heavy steel barrel directly under his own chin. For several agonizing, intensely silent minutes, a deeply tense standoff paralyzed the entire perimeter. Hostage negotiators desperately pleaded with him, trying to pierce through his heavily fractured mental state. The man who had just shown absolutely no mercy to 4 innocent strangers was now visibly trembling, deeply terrified of facing the immediate consequences of his own horrific actions. Ultimately, the overwhelming pressure broke his resolve. He slowly lowered the weapon, dropping it to the concrete before surrendering completely to the surrounding officers. He was immediately slammed to the ground and heavily restrained, permanently ending one of the deadliest mornings the city had ever witnessed. Do you believe that surrendering in the final moments is a sign of sudden remorse or simply pure cowardice? Share your honest perspective in the comments below. Hit that like button if the intense, nerve-wracking standoff completely stops your breathing. The massive courtroom battle would soon seal his permanent fate. During the highly emotional and incredibly painful trial that followed, the defense desperately attempted to argue that Zane Floyd was suffering from severe mental illness and profound substance abuse, completely incapable of understanding the absolute horror of his relentless actions. However, the deeply traumatized jury, violently disturbed by the cold, calculating nature of the security footage, completely rejected this fragile narrative. The brutal, systematic execution of 4 entirely defenseless victims demanded the absolute highest punishment the legal system could possibly provide. Zane Floyd was swiftly convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to die by lethal injection, a dark, heavy fate he continues to fight behind the thick walls of death row to this very day. The deep, invisible psychological scars left upon the surviving employees and the surrounding quiet suburban neighborhood have never truly healed. The neighborhood grocery store was eventually remodeled and reopened to the public, but the chilling, heavy memory of that violent morning still permanently lingers within the brightly lit aisles, serving as a terrifying reminder that sudden, inexplicable evil can effortlessly shatter the peaceful safety of our most ordinary daily routines. We must now leave the blood-stained aisles of the neighborhood supermarket behind and travel directly into the heavily guarded, ultra-exclusive world of extreme luxury, where a powerful billionaire's absolute worst nightmare would suddenly become a terrifying reality, as his young daughter is violently abducted in the dark, triggering a massive ransom demand and a frantic, desperate race to empty a massive casino vault before it is completely too late. Number 10. Kevin Wynn. We leave the blood-stained aisles of the neighborhood supermarket behind and travel directly into the heavily guarded, ultra-exclusive world of extreme luxury, where a powerful billionaire's absolute worst nightmare was about to become a terrifying reality. In the summer of 1993, Steve Wynn was the undisputed king of Las Vegas, a visionary casino tycoon whose massive, glittering empire was worth billions of dollars. His vast fortune provided his family with a life of unimaginable privilege, but it also painted a massive, invisible target on the backs of those he loved the most. On a quiet July evening, his 26-year-old daughter, Kevin Wynn, arrived at her highly secure, upscale desert home, completely unaware that heavily armed shadows were waiting inside. Two ruthless men ambushed her the moment she stepped through her own front door, violently overpowering her and binding her wrists with heavy tape. They forced her into the back of her own vehicle and drove out into the sprawling, suffocating darkness of the deep desert, leaving behind only a ringing telephone to deliver their terrifying message. The kidnappers demanded an astronomical $2.5 million in cold, untraceable cash, threatening to brutally murder the young woman if the police were involved. How do you maintain your sanity when your child is held hostage in the dark by faceless monsters? Let me know your psychological theories down in the comments below. If the terrifying vulnerability of even the most powerful families shocks you, drop a like on this video. The desperate billionaire was about to use his massive casino to save his daughter's life. When Steve Wynn answered the phone and heard the heavily distorted voice demanding millions for his daughter's life, his entire world completely stopped spinning. He was fully aware that the incredibly fragile situation could end in a horrific bloodbath if he hesitated for even a single second. Driven by pure, frantic paternal instinct, he completely bypassed the slow procedures of traditional law enforcement and immediately mobilized the massive resources of his own empire. He contacted the vault managers at his sprawling Mirage Casino, ordering them to rapidly bundle exactly $2.5 million in used, untraceable $100 bills. He stuffed the mountain of cash into heavy plastic bags, threw them into the trunk of his car, and drove alone into the pitch-black desert, strictly following the highly specific, terrifying instructions delivered by the kidnappers over a secure line. The tension of that solitary drive, carrying a fortune through the empty wasteland to buy back his own flesh and blood, is absolutely impossible to fully comprehend. He dropped the heavy bags of cash at the designated isolated location, parked his car, and waited in pure agony for the phone to ring again. Would you blindly trust the word of a violent criminal, or would you risk everything to involve heavily armed police? Tell me what terrifying decision you would make in the comments section. If the raw, desperate bravery of a father trying to save his child deeply moves you, please leave a like. A terrifying silence fell over the desert as the massive ransom vanished into the dark. After an agonizing, deeply terrifying wait that felt like an eternity, the kidnappers finally called the desperate billionaire back with the exact location of his missing daughter. Law enforcement rushed to the parking lot of the massive international airport, where they found Kevin Wynn physically unharmed, tightly bound and left alone inside her own vehicle. The profound wave of absolute relief that washed over the family was immediately replaced by a fierce, highly intense federal manhunt to track down the brazen criminals who had just pulled off the largest successful ransom in the history of the city. The FBI quickly assumed that they were hunting a highly sophisticated, deeply organized international syndicate capable of executing such a flawless, high-stakes operation. However, the sheer arrogance and absolute stupidity of the kidnappers quickly shattered that terrifying illusion. Instead of quietly hiding their newly acquired fortune, the masterminds immediately began spending the stolen hundreds with unbelievable recklessness. Within mere days of the terrifying abduction, one of the main perpetrators walked into a luxury car dealership in California and attempted to purchase a highly expensive, bright red Ferrari using massive stacks of the exact same untraceable bills stolen from the casino vault. Why do you think criminals capable of pulling off such a massive heist always let their own immense greed completely destroy their freedom? Share your thoughts on this arrogant downfall in the comments below. Hit that like button if you are absolutely stunned by their foolishness. The net was rapidly closing in on the careless kidnappers. The incredibly foolish attempt to buy a bright red Ferrari with a duffel bag full of stolen cash instantly triggered massive federal alarms. The FBI quickly descended upon the dealership, easily tracking the reckless spending spree directly back to a man named Ray Cuddy and his deeply flawed accomplice. They were not sophisticated international operatives, but rather completely ordinary, desperate men blinded by the dazzling allure of the massive casino wealth surrounding them. Heavily armed federal agents kicked down their doors and arrested them, successfully recovering a large portion of the massive ransom that had not yet been foolishly squandered. During the highly publicized federal trial, the deeply traumatized Kevin Wynn bravely faced her terrifying captors in the courtroom, ensuring they would never again walk free to steal another life. Both men were convicted of federal kidnapping and extortion charges, permanently sentenced to spend decades behind the thick, cold concrete walls of a maximum security federal prison. Steve Wynn's immense wealth had made his family a massive target, but it was also the exact weapon he used to bring his daughter home safely, proving that all the money in the world is completely useless if it cannot protect the ones you love. Now, we must pack our bags and leave the bright, glowing neon skyline of the Nevada desert entirely behind us, traveling deep into the freezing, isolated forests of a new state, where a quiet family camping trip would suddenly transform into a brutal, unsolved massacre.